The Immigration Health Surcharge, or IHS, was introduced in April 2015, at which point it was set at £200 per year. The stated purpose of the policy was to, and I quote, ensure that migrants make a proper financial contribution to the cost of their NHS care. Well, we've come quite a long way since then. The level of the charge has risen from the initial £200 first in 2019 to £400 per year, and then from 2020 to £624. Now, thanks to this SI, the main rate is set to rise still further to £1,035 per year. This represents an increase of 66% on the current charge, and compared to 5 years ago, of more than 400%. But while government revenues from the IHS have increased massively since its introduction, far in excess of increases in health spending, by the way, the intent of the policy seems to have shifted significantly. While the IHS has to date primarily served as a means of topping up health spending, according to ministers, the increase provided for in this SI is explicitly linked to the government's commitments on public sector pay. To be clear, this amounts to a massive cross-subsidy from the Home Office to other government departments, with the IHS now raising money for pay increases across the public sector, including police and prison officers, teachers and members of the armed forces, as well as for doctors and nurses. Labour supports the planned pay rises for hard-working and hard-pressed public servants. But in doing so, it would be remiss of me not to ask the questions of the Minister about what could be wide-ranging consequences of raising the IHS to the level set out in this order. The impact assessment acknowledges that the higher charges could, and I quote, deter some potential migrants from applying to enter or remain in the UK. But there simply isn't enough evidence for the government to be able to produce reliable forecasts of how such effects will play out in practice. The government has already been warned by some of our leading universities that they could be facing tuition fee losses from international students in the hundreds of millions of pounds if, as they expect, the increasing costs of studying in the UK become prohibitive for many students and academics who may simply vote with their feet and choose to study elsewhere. The government itself acknowledges this risk in its own impact assessment, but it offers very little in the way of plans to mitigate any such impacts, or to reassure universities and employers that the actual effects of this order will be closely monitored by ministers, with appropriate steps taken to mitigate any unintended consequences, of which they may become aware in the coming months. So any light that the Minister could please shed on these questions, specifically around what the impact could be, what the unintended consequences could be of these changes, any information on that would be gratefully received. On a more practical level, the Minister will no doubt be aware of the concerns raised by many people about aspects of the IHS which they see as inefficient or unfair. The government's ongoing commitment to exempting health and care workers from the charge is welcome. However, the provisions for lower paid or otherwise vulnerable migrants to request a waiver or a full or partial refund of charges already paid appear to be little used in practice, with less than 2% of those subject to the IHS being granted a waiver by the Home Office, according to the government's impact assessment. Visa application fees are set to increase sharply alongside these IHS increases, and there is still no mechanism to allow poorer migrants to spread these huge costs out over, for example, monthly instalments. It's therefore incumbent on the Minister to provide assurances and reassurances to honourable members and indeed to our constituents and more broadly that the government will take steps to ensure that the most vulnerable migrants are adequately protected from the threat of poverty or outright destitution. So my second and final question to him would be whether he can please provide some more detail around these aspects of the impact on poorer migrants and the effective mitigation of some of the impacts for those who would be struggling to pay this IHS in combination with increased visa fees. Thank you very much, Mr. Pickford.
Minister.